They kicked me out of my own home, thinking they owned it. I waited until midnight to pull the deed from my pocket. The digital glow of the message was a stark and unwelcome intrusion, a rectangle of harsh white text against the phone's dark screen, splintering the quiet sanctuary of Alara's evening. It pulsed there, a silent harbinger from Cale, her only son, a man who, in his early 50s, seemed to have systematically dismantled any lingering vestiges of filial respect. Mother, the message began, the single word devoid of any familial warmth, a cold preamble to the decree that followed. Lysandra and I have decided it's time for you to move out. This house is simply too small for our growing needs, and honestly, your presence has become restrictive. We found a lovely, quaint assisted living facility a few towns over. It's for your own good, really. You're getting on, and we can't be expected to constantly care for you. We've arranged for a moving company next Tuesday. Your belongings are already being packed. Alara, a woman of 78 years, whose innate elegance still managed to defy the subtle physical betrayals of age, read the words. Not once, but twice, allowing each syllable to sink into the quiet depths of her consciousness. Her fingers, still graceful despite the almost imperceptible tremor that sometimes touched them, did not tremble. Her heart, a vessel that had for years held a silent reservoir of heartache, unacknowledged generosity, and unspoken sacrifice, did not skip a single beat. Instead, an extraordinary stillness descended upon her, profound and absolute. This was not the stillness of shock, which might imply a sudden, disorienting blow. No, this was the stillness of crystalline clarity, a breathtaking moment of perfect, unclouded understanding. For years, she had felt it, the subtle, then increasingly overt, chipping away at her dignity, her intrinsic worth slowly being reduced to the fluctuating balance of her bank account. This message, however, was no mere chip. It was a sledgehammer blow, delivered with the calculated intention of flattening her spirit, of crushing her into passive submission. Yet, in a twist of fate only the truly desperate can orchestrate, it achieved precisely the opposite. It did not diminish her, it solidified a resolve that had been slowly, painstakingly simmering beneath the meticulously maintained surface of her compliant exterior. A ghost of a smile, thin and chillingly cold, touched her lips. A profound and terrible realization bloomed within her: they thought they owned this house. More disturbingly, they thought they owned her. She placed the phone, with an almost ritualistic care, onto the polished surface of the mahogany table beside her. Its screen, now dark, offered a fleeting reflection of her composed, almost serene face. The grand living room, a vast space she had personally curated and decorated with pieces collected from bustling souks and hushed antique shops across the world alongside her beloved late husband, now seemed to hum with an unspoken, almost palpable tension. This house, these very walls that now threatened to become the cold, unfeeling embrace of her imminent imprisonment, stood as a testament to her past life, a life of immense, almost unimaginable wealth, and, she had always believed, unwavering, reciprocal family devotion. Cale and Lysandra, with their casual, almost thoughtless cruelty, had just ignited a fire within Alara that they, in their blissful ignorance, would soon come to regret with a depth they could not yet fathom. They were entirely oblivious, of course. Their limited imagination envisioned her weeping, meticulously packing her few cherished items, and meekly stepping into the twilight of her life, gratefully accepting her assigned quiet corner, out of their way. They were about to learn, with a harshness that would leave them reeling, that Alara, the gentle widow, the quiet benefactress, was also the undisputed queen of her own domain. And she was about to reclaim her throne. To truly grasp the serene, almost clinical quality of Alara's reaction to Cale's dismissive message, one had to delve into the intricate, almost labyrinthine history of her relationship with her only son and his relentlessly grasping wife. Alara had once been the cherished and adored wife of Arthur Hayes, a veritable titan in the real estate world, a man whose almost mythical Midas touch seemed to transform every parcel of land he acquired into shimmering gold. When Arthur, her steadfast companion and loving partner of 5 decades, passed away a decade prior, he had left Alara a fortune that truly exceeded most people's wildest, most extravagant dreams. It was a legacy composed of an expansive portfolio of prime properties, a diversified and meticulously managed investment fund, and liquid assets that were so substantial they ensured generations of unparalleled comfort and security. Among these numerous properties was the sprawling, magnificent estate in which Cale, Lysandra, and their 2 children, Brandon and Chloe, currently resided. It was a home Alara had purchased years ago, a gift, she had believed with every fiber of her loving heart, of enduring love and unbreakable security for her burgeoning family, a tangible legacy for her son and his descendants. Initially, after Arthur's passing, Alara, ever keen to maintain her independence and not become a burden, had moved into a smaller, charming carriage house nestled discreetly on the vast estate grounds. This arrangement allowed her to preserve her cherished autonomy while remaining comfortably close to her son and his family, a proximity she deeply valued. However, a few years later, after a minor, almost inconsequential fall that left her with little more than a bruised ego and a slight limp for a few days, Cale and Lysandra had insisted, with a persuasive blend of feigned concern and thinly veiled urgency, that she move into the main house. They cited her supposed need for closer supervision, a phrase that, in retrospect, now rang with chilling undertones of calculation. Alara, ever trusting, ever eager for the warmth of familial closeness, had readily agreed, naively believing their pleas were born of genuine, selfless concern. It was a profound and ultimately devastating miscalculation. It was not genuine concern. It was a strategic, meticulously planned maneuver to gain unfettered, round-the-clock access to her, and, far more importantly, to her substantial finances. The financial bleed had commenced subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a slow leak in a vast dam. Cale, a man of decidedly moderate ambition and lamentably negligible talent in the cutthroat world of business, had perpetually struggled to maintain a lifestyle that even remotely commensurate with his wife's lofty, perpetually escalating aspirations. Lysandra, a social climber of formidable determination and unwavering focus, saw Alara's vast wealth not as a finite resource to be managed with prudence, but as a personal ATM, an endless, bottomless wellspring from which to fund her elaborate, increasingly extravagant charades of luxury and social superiority. Alara had paid for everything. Absolutely everything. When Cale's struggling marketing firm, perpetually on the brink of collapse, hit yet another seemingly insurmountable snag, Alara had quietly, without fanfare or public acknowledgement, transferred a 7-figure sum, a staggering $1.2 million, to be precise, into his business account. It was ostensibly to tide them over, a sum she never once saw repaid, nor did she ever receive an earnest offer of repayment. When Lysandra, with a fleeting glance at a magazine advertisement, yearned for a new Mercedes S-Class, Alara had not hesitated for a moment, her elegant hands signing the check for the full amount, a gleaming black testament to her boundless generosity that now sat conspicuously in their expansive driveway. 2 years later, when Lysandra, with an air of dismissive boredom, declared the Mercedes too common, and immediately set her avaricious sights on a Bentley, Alara, with a deep sigh she meticulously kept hidden from their sight, had again acquiesced, trading in the Mercedes and covering the substantial difference, which amounted to over $150,000. Her own modest sedan, a practical and dependable choice, remained in the far corner of the garage, largely unnoticed, almost forgotten, a silent testament to her self-effacing nature. The children's education proved to be another significant and ongoing drain on Alara's seemingly inexhaustible resources. Brandon, with his burgeoning penchant for exclusive, outrageously expensive boarding schools that promised elite connections over genuine academic rigor, and Chloe, whose artistic talents, while genuine, seemingly demanded the most exclusive, exorbitantly priced private art academies in Europe, had their tuition bills, running into 6 figures annually for each child, meticulously and consistently paid by Alara. She even covered their exotic and outrageously expensive summer camps, a month-long, exclusive safari in the Masai Mara for Brandon, an intensive, gourmet culinary program in the sun-drenched hills of Tuscany for Chloe, all without question, without a single word of complaint, and almost always without any genuine expression of gratitude. The only thanks she ever received was a fleeting, distracted nod or a mumbled, impersonal, "Thanks, Grandma," if she was fortunate enough to elicit even that much. The house itself, though legally and unequivocally owned by Alara, functioned entirely as Cale and Lysandra's personal domain, a grand stage for their manufactured lives, maintained entirely at Alara's expense. She meticulously paid the property taxes, which ran into tens of thousands annually, a figure that dwarfed many people's entire yearly incomes. She covered the exorbitant utility bills for the sprawling mansion, the immense water consumption for the Olympic-sized swimming pool, the relentless electricity usage for the air conditioning that ran constantly, even in mild weather, to ensure Lysandra's perpetual, pampered comfort. She paid the salaries of the full-time housekeeper, Maria, who worked tirelessly but was rarely acknowledged, the gardener, Mr. Henderson, who meticulously manicured the vast, intricate lawns, and the pool service technician, who ensured the water remained sparkling blue. Every repair, every upgrade, the new gourmet kitchen that cost $250,000 and was rarely used for actual cooking, the custom-built home theater that swallowed tens of thousands more, the lavish master bathroom renovation with its imported marble and gold fixtures, all came directly, without question or complaint, from Alara's accounts. Her own needs, however, were consistently relegated to a forgotten afterthought. When her old armchair in the living room, a beloved, comfortable piece that had been her favorite spot for quiet reading for decades, began to fray gently at the edges, Lysandra had dismissed her soft suggestion of reupholstering it with a wave of her hand. Honestly, Mother, it's an eyesore. It completely clashes with the new aesthetic. We're redecorating the whole room anyway, you won't need it. The armchair, a repository of cherished memories, was unceremoniously discarded, summarily hauled away without a word of discussion, replaced by a sleek, unforgivingly modern chaise lounge that offered Alara no comfort, no solace, only a stark reminder of her diminished standing. Her requests for small, personal comforts, a new reading lamp, a warm blanket for the evenings, were often met with exasperated sighs, thinly veiled impatience, or outright dismissal. When she mentioned, almost timidly, a long-held desire for a modest trip to visit an old, dear friend in the quaint Scottish Highlands, Lysandra had scoffed openly, a dismissive laugh escaping her perfectly rouged lips. Mother, you're far too frail for travel. Honestly, the very idea. Besides, Cale and I were planning a truly essential cruise to the Caribbean. You wouldn't want to miss helping us with that, would you? The implication was clear. Her desires were insignificant, her existence merely a tool for their convenience. The emotional toll, she realized in the quiet moments of the night, was far greater, far more insidious than the financial one. Alara was routinely excluded from family decisions, even those that directly concerned her own well-being or her own home. She was treated as an aging relic, a senile, increasingly irrelevant figure whose opinions were not only worthless but often an irritating hindrance. Dinners, once joyous family affairs, were now often eaten with her relegated to a separate, smaller table nestled awkwardly in the corner of the vast dining room, while Cale, Lysandra, and the children occupied the head of the grand, sprawling table, their laughter and animated conversations deliberately excluding her, creating an invisible but impenetrable wall of isolation. Her presence was tolerated, but barely acknowledged. When friends of Cale and Lysandra visited, Alara was often introduced dismissively as Cale's mother. She lives with us, as if she were a dependent, a charity case, an unfortunate appendage, rather than the true owner of the very roof over their heads and the ultimate source of their entire extravagant lifestyle. Lysandra would often make condescending remarks about Alara's age, her supposedly failing memory, or her perceived lack of modern understanding, always delivered with a saccharine sweet smile that barely masked the venomous contempt beneath. Oh, Mother, you wouldn't understand this new technology, would you? Just let Cale handle it, she would coo, or, don't worry your pretty little head, Mother, we'll take care of everything. Alara, a woman of immense personal pride and quiet, deeply ingrained dignity, had swallowed these daily indignities, endured these subtle cruelties, day after day, year after unending year. She craved their affection, their simple respect, their basic acknowledgement of her humanity. She clung to the fading hope that her boundless generosity would eventually win their hardened hearts, that they would finally recognize her profound, unconditional love and perhaps, just perhaps, reciprocate it in some small measure. She had watched Cale, her only son, grow distant, his eyes reflecting not the warmth of familial love, but a cold, calculating assessment of her utility, her financial value. She saw Lysandra's barely concealed disdain, her thinly veiled contempt for the woman who tirelessly funded her elaborate social aspirations. Even the grandchildren, Brandon and Chloe, once sweet and loving in their innocent youth, had learned the family's dismissive ways, seeing Grandma Alara as little more than a living ATM, an inexhaustible source of expensive gifts, indulgent treats, and endless pocket money. The incident with her beloved antique porcelain doll collection had been particularly hurtful, a raw wound that festered for weeks. These delicate, exquisitely crafted figures, each one a treasured heirloom inherited from her own cherished grandmother, had been arranged meticulously in a beautiful, glass-fronted display cabinet in the living room, a tangible link to her past. One afternoon, she returned from a solitary walk to find them haphazardly shoved into a dusty cardboard box in the dark hallway closet, their delicate porcelain faces obscured, their intricate dresses crushed. In their place, Lysandra's garish, oversized modern art sculptures, all sharp angles and clashing colors, now dominated the space. They just didn't fit the new aesthetic, Mother, Lysandra had chirped, her voice devoid of any hint of apology, any flicker of understanding. You should be glad, these are far more valuable. Alara had felt a profound pang that day, a deep, aching sorrow, not just for the loss of a physical possession, but for the casual, brutal discarding of a precious piece of her own history, a tangible link to her heritage, treated with such thoughtless carelessness. These were but a few examples in a decade-long, soul-crushing saga of one-sided, relentless generosity and pervasive, insidious emotional abuse. The message from Cale, delivered with such cold efficiency, announcing her eviction from her own home, was not just the last straw, it was the final, undeniable, irrefutable proof that her deep, unwavering love had been tragically mistaken for weakness, her boundless generosity for an entitlement, a never-ending birthright. They saw her as a burden, a financial resource to be ruthlessly tapped until dry, then summarily discarded. But in that singular, defining moment, as the grand, silent house stood still around her, Alara understood something profound, something that pierced through years of self-deception and pain. She had given them everything, poured her very essence into their lives, but they had given her nothing in return but pain, neglect, and a crushing sense of isolation. The time for silent suffering was irrevocably over. The time for reclamation, for the defiant assertion of her own worth, had gloriously begun. The following morning, Alara rose with a vibrant, almost exhilarating sense of purpose, a calm, unyielding determination that belied the monumental, seismic shift occurring deep within her very being. The morning light, streaming through the large bay windows, seemed to her eyes brighter than usual, the crisp air more invigorating, carrying with it the scent of possibility. She dressed meticulously, with a newfound deliberateness, choosing a sharp, impeccably tailored suit she hadn't worn in years, a garment that had once belonged to her former life, now a silent, powerful testament to the strong, capable woman she had once been and was now, gloriously, rediscovering. A sense of quiet anticipation settled over her as she smoothed the fabric over her hips. Her first call, made with a steady hand and an unshakable resolve, was to Mr. Harrison, her long-standing financial advisor and the meticulous executor of Arthur's immense estate. His voice, usually jovial and infused with a gentle warmth, held a distinct note of concern when she began to explain, in a voice devoid of any discernible emotion, the precise, radical nature of her intentions. Mr. Harrison, she stated, her voice remarkably clear and steady, each word measured and precise, I need you to immediately revoke all power of attorney previously granted to Cale. This is effective immediately, without exception. Furthermore, I require a full, comprehensive accounting of all standing payments, every single one, made from my accounts on behalf of Cale, Lysandra, or their children. And I want them cancelled. All of them. The house staff, Maria, Mr. Henderson the gardener, the pool service, all their payments are to be terminated. The utility bills for this property, electricity, water, gas, all to be terminated from their name and transferred solely into mine, effective immediately. Their credit cards, which as you know are directly linked to my accounts, are to be frozen, every single one, effective immediately. And finally, Mr. Harrison, I need you to arrange for a comprehensive legal review of my undisputed ownership of this property, with a specific, urgent focus on initiating eviction proceedings for the current occupants. Mr. Harrison, a shrewd, experienced man who had quietly witnessed the slow, agonizing erosion of Alara's spirit and autonomy over the years, listened in stunned, profound silence. He had always harbored suspicions regarding the full extent of Cale and Lysandra's insidious exploitation, but Alara, in her quiet, persistent way, had always dismissed his gentle inquiries, subtly deflecting his concerns. Now, her tone left no room for doubt, no space for negotiation. "Alara," he began cautiously, his voice tinged with a blend of apprehension and dawning admiration, are you quite sure? This is a significant, indeed, a drastic step." "Quite sure, Mr. Harrison," Alara replied, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, not of fear but of deeply suppressed emotion, touching the very edge of her voice. "More sure than I have been about anything in a very long time. They have tragically mistaken my kindness for weakness, my generosity for an entitlement. They have forgotten whose roof they live under, whose resources they have so carelessly squandered. It is time, Mr. Harrison, that they remembered." And with that, she quietly hung up the phone, a palpable sense of release washing over her. The intricate wheels of justice, or perhaps, more accurately, simply the formidable wheels of financial retribution, began to turn with surprising, almost exhilarating speed. Within mere hours, the first, barely perceptible tremors of panic rippled through Cale and Lysandra's meticulously constructed facade of opulence, threatening to shatter it entirely. Lysandra was the first to experience the chilling reality of their impending ruin. She was, as was her daily habit, at her favorite high-end boutique, a temple of designer labels and exclusive accessories, admiring a diamond-encrusted bracelet, a frivolous bauble she had convinced herself she absolutely needed for an upcoming charity gala she planned to attend purely for social validation. She handed her platinum credit card to the impeccably dressed sales associate with a dramatic flourish, expecting the usual swift, unquestioning approval. Instead, the sleek machine emitted a jarring, insolent beep, flashing the stark, humiliating word, "declined." Lysandra's perfectly composed smile faltered, a flicker of annoyance clouding her features. "There must be a mistake," she stated, her voice tight with barely suppressed irritation. "Try it again." The sales associate, a young woman with practiced politeness that barely concealed a hint of amusement, tried again. "Declined," it beeped once more, louder, more insistent. Lysandra, her face flushing a furious crimson, tried another card, then yet another, each met with the same humiliating rejection, each beep echoing the silent collapse of her carefully cultivated world. "This is impossible," she hissed under her breath, her voice barely audible, a desperate plea to the uncaring universe. "These are all linked to Alara's accounts." She stormed out of the store, the coveted bracelet left behind, her sense of entitlement deeply, irrevocably bruised, her carefully constructed image of effortless wealth crumbling around her. Meanwhile, Cale was at his exclusive golf club, midway through a critical round with two potential investors whose capital was crucial for his floundering marketing firm, when his phone began to buzz incessantly, an insistent, frantic vibration against his hip. It was the financial manager of his firm, his voice a frantic, high-pitched squeal. "Mr. Hayes, there's a serious issue. A major issue. The payroll didn't go through this morning. All our accounts are frozen. We can't access any funds. And the bank is saying all lines of credit tied to your mother's personal guarantee have been revoked. We're in a complete financial lockdown." Cale felt a cold, paralyzing dread creep up his spine, a sensation he had never before experienced. "What? That's impossible. My mother wouldn't, she couldn't." He stammered, his golf swing ruined, his face paling to an alarming shade of white as he instantly imagined the utter chaos this would unleash within his precarious business. He abruptly, unceremoniously left the course, abandoning his flustered investors mid-hole, and sped home, the dread building with every mile. The panic escalated throughout the day, a relentless tide of alarming revelations. Brandon's exclusive private school called Lysandra, their tone curt and uncompromising, informing her that his tuition for the upcoming term had not been paid and his enrollment was now provisional, contingent upon immediate payment. Chloe's elite art academy sent a stern, unyielding email stating her account was severely overdue and her access to classes would be suspended by the end of the week. The housekeeper, Maria, a loyal presence for years, timidly informed Lysandra that her direct deposit had not arrived, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Mr. Henderson, the gardener, usually meticulously trimming the hedges at precisely 9 a.m., simply didn't show up, leaving the sprawling lawns to grow unruly. The once pristine Olympic-sized pool, for which Alara had paid a fortune in maintenance, began to turn a disturbing, murky shade of green, its surface accumulating leaves and debris. By late afternoon, the grand house, usually a hive of pampered activity and ostentatious luxury, felt eerily, oppressively still, a palpable chill settling over its vast, echoing rooms. Cale and Lysandra, their faces drawn and contorted with a mixture of disbelief and furious indignation, paced the living room like caged animals. Their usual airs of arrogant superiority had vanished entirely, replaced by a raw, naked, primal fear. "She's gone mad!" Lysandra shrieked, clutching her designer handbag as if it were a flimsy shield against the encroaching tide of financial ruin. "She's cutting us off. Every single penny. How could she do this? She's trying to destroy us." Cale, usually so assured in his mother's endless, seemingly bottomless well of resources, felt a visceral, paralyzing terror. "I don't know, Lysandra. This is unprecedented. She's never done anything like this. We need to talk to her, now." He looked across the vast room at Alara, who was calmly sipping her herbal tea in her favorite, now ironically uncomfortable, modern chaise lounge, a book open serenely in her lap. Her gaze was distant, serene, almost detached, as if she were merely a passive observer to their unfolding, self-inflicted drama. They had no idea, absolutely no idea, the full, devastating extent of the storm that was about to break over their heads. They only felt the first, ominous few drops. The confrontation erupted that evening, a maelstrom of furious accusations and desperate, increasingly pathetic pleas, swirling violently around Alara's quiet, unshakable dignity. Cale and Lysandra stormed into the living room, their faces contorted with a furious mixture of rage, disbelief, and burgeoning, paralyzing panic. They found Alara sitting by the magnificent fireplace, the soft, flickering glow of the flames illuminating her placid, unreadable features, casting long, dancing shadows behind her. "Mother! What is the meaning of this?" Cale roared, his voice trembling not with genuine fury, but with a raw, desperate fear, a fury he rarely, if ever, dared to direct at her. "My cards are declined. My firm's accounts are frozen. My employees aren't getting paid. What in God's name have you done?" Lysandra, her perfectly coiffed hair slightly disheveled from her earlier retail humiliation and frantic pacing, stepped forward, her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical crescendo. "Alara, how dare you? Do you know the sheer embarrassment you've caused me? My boutique card declined. Brandon's school called. Chloe's art lessons are suspended. Are you trying to deliberately ruin us? To destroy everything we've built?" Her eyes narrowed, gleaming with a venomous, self-pitying rage. "Is this about us asking you to move? Because if it is, it's a monstrous, completely disproportionate overreaction. We simply need more space for our family. It's a perfectly reasonable request." Alara slowly, deliberately lowered her book, placing it with meticulous precision onto the side table beside her. Her gaze, when it finally met theirs, was steady, unwavering, and utterly devoid of the usual weariness, the familiar sadness, or the quiet resignation they had grown so accustomed to exploiting. There was only a cool, almost surgical precision in her eyes, an unnerving clarity. "Ruin you?" Alara's voice was soft, barely above a whisper, yet it cut through their angry, self-serving tirade like a sharp, honed blade, striking at the very core of their carefully constructed delusions. "Did you ever once stop, truly stop, to consider what you have systematically done to me over the past decade? Did you ever consider the quiet ruin I have endured, patiently, silently, day after day, year after year, while diligently funding your entire existence?" Cale scoffed, a dismissive, arrogant sound. "Funding our existence? Mother, you're being dramatic. Seriously. You have more money than you could ever possibly spend in 10 lifetimes. It's your duty as a parent to support your children, to ensure their well-being, their success. Duty? Ilara's voice hardened imperceptibly, a subtle shift that sent a prickle of unease down Cale's spine. Is it my duty to buy Lysandra a Bentley because a perfectly good Mercedes was suddenly too common? Is it my duty to pay for Brandon's month-long safari in Africa and Chloe's ridiculously expensive culinary school in Italy while my own humble, modest requests for comfort or connection were summarily dismissed as frivolous, as bothersome? Is it my duty to pay your property taxes, which amount to more than many people earn in a year, your exorbitant utility bills for a house I barely occupied, your entire household staff, all while being consistently treated like an invisible burden, a senile figure in my own home? A home I own. Lysandra, seizing an opportunity to redirect the blame, interjected, her voice dripping with condescension, a saccharine smile twisting her lips. Oh, please, Ilara. You're old. You don't need all that money. It's far better off with us, being put to good, productive use, maintaining our social standing, ensuring our children's future. It reflects well on you, too, you know, having successful, well-connected family members. Ilara's gaze, previously cool, now fixed on Lysandra, and for the very first time, Lysandra felt a genuine shiver of icy fear crawl down her spine, a realization that something profound had irrevocably shifted. Reflects well on me? Ilara's voice was now perfectly level, perfectly calm, yet it carried an undeniable force. Lysandra, you have consistently, without fail, treated me with thinly veiled disdain, as if I were a senile old woman utterly incapable of rational thought or independent action. You have paraded my vast wealth as if it were your own, accepting my boundless generosity as an inherent right, never a gift, never a sacrifice. You heartlessly threw out my grandmother's porcelain dolls, fragile pieces of my history, my heritage, without a second thought, without a shred of remorse. You have systematically erased my very presence from this house, from your lives, reducing me to nothing more than a living, breathing bank account, a convenient source of funds. Cale, seeing his usual manipulative tactics failing spectacularly, tried a different, more insidious approach. He softened his voice, attempting a feigned, artificial tenderness. Mother, please, don't be like this. We love you. We truly do. We just thought, you needed a more supervised environment. For your safety. We were trying to help, genuinely. Help? Ilara's laugh was a dry, hollow sound, devoid of humor, laced with bitter irony. You call kicking me out of my own home, the home I paid for, the home I legally own, helping? You thought you could simply discard me, pack me off to some impersonal assisted living facility, and then continue to live in the lap of luxury on my dime, without so much as a thought for my feelings, my dignity, my very existence. Cale tried to interrupt again, a desperate plea forming on his lips, but Ilara held up a single, elegant hand, a gesture that unequivocally silenced him. I have spent years, indeed, decades, pouring my resources, my unwavering love, my very essence into your lives. I paid for your first apartment, Cale, a substantial down payment that ensured your independence. I covered the crippling startup costs for your failing business not once, but twice, rescuing it from imminent collapse. I paid off Lysandra's considerable student loans even before you were married, a generous gift she never even had the decency to thank me for. I bought your first family car, a spacious SUV, when you were struggling to make ends meet. When that grew old, I replaced it. And then I bought Lysandra her dream cars, not because I desired to, but because I, foolishly, desperately, wanted your happiness, your contentment. I paid for every single doctor's visit, every dental bill, every luxurious vacation you ever took as a family, from the Caribbean to Europe. I paid for the children's entire education, from kindergarten through their various specialized academies. I even covered their outrageously expensive extracurriculars, Brandon's exclusive sports equipment, Chloe's private music lessons, her horse riding. I have been your personal bank, your endless well of resources, your silent, ever-present safety net. And in return, you have given me nothing but contempt, exclusion, and now, the ultimate insult, eviction from my own home. Elara rose from her chair, her posture ramrod straight, her eyes blazing with a quiet, undeniable fire that seemed to scorch the very air around them. Cale and Lysandra instinctively took a step back, sensing the profound, terrifying shift in her demeanor, the raw, untamed power emanating from her once submissive form. "You speak of duty, Cale. Let me tell you about duty. My duty, as your mother, was to raise you to be a man of integrity, of gratitude, of compassion. I seem to have failed miserably in that regard." She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle, then her voice dropped to a chilling, almost guttural whisper. "And as for this house, the one you so casually decided to evict me from, the one you so arrogantly believe is too small for your burgeoning needs, the one you treat as your own personal kingdom, your own private domain." She reached, with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness, into the inner pocket of her tailored suit jacket. Her hand emerged, holding a single, folded document. It was a crisp, official-looking paper, sealed with a formal stamp, clearly authentic. She unfolded it slowly, deliberately, the soft, rustling sound of the paper the only sound in the tense, silent room. Her eyes, filled now with a triumphant, undeniable gleam, met Cale's, then Lysandra's, holding their gazes captive. "This," Elara announced, her voice ringing with clear, undeniable authority, each word a hammer blow, "is the deed to this property. The original, legally binding deed, registered solely in my name, since the very day I purchased it 25 years ago. This is my house. Not yours. Never yours. And you, Cale and Lysandra Hayes, are merely guests in it. Guests who have profoundly overstayed their welcome and shown a staggering, unforgivable lack of respect for their hostess." Cale's face went ashen, all color draining from it as if by magic. Lysandra gasped, a strangled sound escaping her lips, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. Their eyes darted wildly from the undeniable document clutched firmly in Elara's hand to the opulent surroundings, suddenly seeing the expensive furniture, the valuable art, the very walls themselves, not as their possessions, but as stark, mocking symbols of Elara's quiet, devastating power. The air around them seemed to crackle with the weight of her revelation. "Therefore," Elara continued, her voice gaining strength and chilling finality with each deliberate word, "since you have so kindly arranged for a moving company to pack my belongings next Tuesday, I have taken the liberty of rerouting their services. They will indeed be here next Tuesday, but they will be packing your belongings. You have precisely 1 week, exactly 7 days, to vacate my property. Effective midnight tonight, all access to my financial resources is permanently, irrevocably severed. The staff you've grown accustomed to, Maria, Mr. Henderson, the pool service, will no longer be working here. The utilities will be transferred back into my name, and any outstanding bills incurred by you during your unauthorized stay will be your sole responsibility, yours alone." She held their stunned, terrified gazes, allowing the full, crushing weight of her words to sink in, to permeate their very bones. "You believed you owned this house. You believed you owned me, body and soul. You were wrong on both counts. Profoundly, tragically wrong. And now, you will learn what it truly means to stand on your own 2 feet, without the vast, limitless safety net you have so cruelly, so wantonly abused." Cale, finally finding his voice, stammered, his words barely coherent, "Mother, you can't. We'll be ruined. Utterly ruined. Where will we go? What about the children? Our children?" "That, Cale," Elara said, a chilling, absolute finality in her tone, "is no longer my concern. It is yours. You made your bed when you sent me that message, that cruel, dismissive decree. Now you will lie in it. And this time, you will do so without my money cushioning your inevitable fall." She turned and walked away, her departure as quiet and dignified as her entry, leaving them standing amidst the shattered ruins of their entitled world, the deed still clutched firmly in her hand, a potent, undeniable symbol of her reclaimed sovereignty, her unyielding triumph. Cale and Lysandra stood frozen, utterly paralyzed, the silence in the grand living room echoing Elara's devastating declaration with a deafening resonance. The meticulously curated art on the walls, the expensive furniture, the very air they breathed, suddenly felt alien, borrowed, imbued with a mocking quality. The initial shock, profound and incapacitating, slowly, agonizingly gave way to a cold, visceral terror that permeated their every cell. They were not merely cut off, they were cast adrift, abruptly and violently, without a single life raft, into a terrifying sea of financial destitution. Lysandra was the first to break the agonizing silence, her voice a strangled whisper, barely audible. No, no, she can't do this. She can't. This is our home. Our lives. Our children's lives. She began to pace frantically, her manicured hands tearing at her perfectly styled hair, her composure utterly shattered. The children. What about Brandon and Chloe? Their schools. Their friends. Their entire lives are here. How could she be so cruel? Cale, however, was already in a desperate, frantic calculation mode. He pulled out his phone, his fingers shaking uncontrollably as he scrolled through his contacts, his mind racing for any semblance of a solution. I need to call a lawyer. Immediately. This has to be illegal. She can't just evict us like this. We've lived here for years. There must be some squatter's rights, some legal loophole, some way out of this. He was desperate, grasping frantically at straws, his mind reeling from the sudden, catastrophic shift in their reality. They spent the remainder of the evening making frantic, increasingly desperate, and ultimately futile calls. Their expensive, slick lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, listened patiently, his professional demeanor betraying nothing, then delivered the crushing news with brutal honesty. Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, I'm afraid your mother is entirely within her legal rights. The property is unequivocally, irrevocably in her name. There is no lease agreement. You are, legally speaking, merely guests. And she has given you ample, legally sufficient notice to vacate. Any attempt to fight this will be extremely costly, entirely futile, and could potentially expose you to further legal repercussions, including charges for prolonged unauthorized occupancy or even damages. The cold, hard, inescapable truth slammed into them like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of their sails. There was no loophole. There was no escape. The next few days were a blur of escalating panic, frantic packing, and burgeoning chaos. The house staff, receiving their final paychecks directly from Alara's account, packed their bags and departed, leaving the once immaculate mansion to descend rapidly into disarray. The housekeeper, Maria, a kind woman who had silently observed their cruelty for years, offered Alara a knowing, sympathetic glance as she left, a silent acknowledgement of the justice finally, deservedly served. The once gleaming floors accumulated dust and debris, the gourmet kitchen stood unused, its expensive appliances gleaming coldly in the neglect, the luxurious bathrooms began to show alarming signs of neglect, the pool turning a vibrant, disgusting green. Lysandra tried, desperately, to resume her meticulously curated social life, but the whispers had already begun to circulate through her privileged circles. Her credit cards were still consistently declining, forcing her to make increasingly flimsy excuses, to avoid situations where she might be publicly exposed. The Bentley, for which the next exorbitant payment was due in a few short days, now felt like a lead weight, an impossible burden rather than a gleaming status symbol. Cale's business, already teetering on the brink, began its rapid, irreversible collapse under the unbearable weight of frozen accounts, unpaid employees, and a rapidly disintegrating reputation. His wary investors pulled out, unwilling to associate with a man whose personal finances were clearly in such spectacular disarray. The calls from furious, unforgiving creditors began, relentless and unforgiving, a constant, shrill reminder of their impending ruin. They tried every emotional manipulation tactic in their extensive playbook on Alara. Lysandra wept dramatically, copious, unconvincing tears streaming down her face, begging for forgiveness, promising to change, to be a better daughter-in-law, to show gratitude. Cale pleaded, invoking their shared history, their unbreakable bond as mother and son, painting a dire, melodramatic picture of their inevitable destitution, their lives utterly ruined. They even brought Brandon and Chloe, who, coached meticulously by their desperate parents, sobbed and begged their grandmother to reconsider, promising, with tear-streaked faces, to be good, to be different. Elara met each frantic, manipulative attempt with the same serene, unyielding gaze, her resolve like granite. "Your tears, your desperate pleas, they ring hollow," she told them calmly, her voice soft but firm. "They are not born of genuine remorse, of true understanding, but purely of fear for your own comfort, your own lavish lifestyle. For years, I begged for your affection, your respect, your simple kindness, your basic human acknowledgement. You offered me none. Now, when your comfort, your very existence, is threatened, you suddenly find your voices, your tears. It is too late. The well has run dry." Her heart, though it ached with a quiet sorrow for the bewildered children, remained resolute. She knew, with a certainty that transcended emotion, that this was a harsh, but ultimately necessary, lesson they all desperately needed to learn, however painful the process might be. As Cale and Lysandra faced the grim, humiliating reality of packing their entire lives into anonymous cardboard boxes, their faces grim with resentment and fear, Elara began to take her first, tentative, yet exhilarating steps towards her new, truly liberated life. She called an old friend, Beatrice, a vibrant, artistic woman she hadn't seen in years, their friendship quietly, subtly suppressed by Cale and Lysandra's snobbish disapproval of her common, unglamorous friends. "Beatrice," Elara said, a genuine, radiant smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like decades, "I'm free. Truly free. And I want to go to Scotland. Just like we always talked about." The mere thought of it, the simple act of planning a journey for herself, filled her with a lightness, an almost youthful exuberance she hadn't felt in decades. She began to meticulously plan her trip, a journey not of escape, but of joyous rediscovery, of reclaiming lost time. She contacted a local charity for elderly women, offering her time, her considerable resources, and her newfound energy, something she had always yearned to do but was told by Lysandra it was beneath her, unsuitable for her station. The house, as Cale and Lysandra's increasingly fewer possessions were systematically, unceremoniously packed into cardboard boxes and loaded onto the waiting moving truck, slowly, miraculously, began to feel like her own again. The oppressive, stifling atmosphere of entitlement, disdain, and casual cruelty that had permeated every room lifted like a heavy fog, replaced by a quiet, pervasive sense of peace, a gentle, welcome calm. The ghost of her beloved husband, Arthur, seemed to smile down upon her from the frames on the wall, a silent, knowing approval of her courage, her strength. For the first time in a very, very long time, Elara felt truly, utterly, profoundly at home. Months passed. The grand mansion, once a gilded cage, now truly, vibrantly belonged to Elara, echoing with her quiet joy rather than their demands. She had meticulously redecorated parts of it, infusing every room with her own refined taste, bringing back cherished items that had been cruelly relegated to dusty storage, and transforming it into a haven of peace, genuine comfort, and personal expression. The modern, cold, uncomfortable furniture Lysandra had insisted upon was replaced with warm, inviting pieces, rich in history and comfort. The vast, echoing rooms now felt like a living, breathing home, not a sterile showroom. Sunlight seemed to stream in more brightly, as if the very house rejoiced in its true owner's freedom. Elara's life had blossomed in ways she never could have imagined possible. She had indeed gone to Scotland, a journey that filled her with profound joy, renewed vigor, and countless cherished memories. She visited old friends, reconnecting with distant relatives, and explored the picturesque, rugged landscapes she had long dreamed of seeing, unburdened by anyone else's expectations. Upon her return, she immersed herself in new hobbies with a youthful enthusiasm. She joined a local book club, something Lysandra had always mocked as quaint and beneath her. She took painting classes, discovering a latent, unexpected talent for watercolors that brought her immense satisfaction. She spent her days pursuing her own interests, her evenings reading by the crackling fire, no longer burdened by the constant, exhausting need to placate or provide. Her health, too, seemed to improve dramatically. The chronic stress that had weighed her down for so long had visibly lifted, replaced by a radiant inner peace that shone from her eyes. She spent her money not on grand, ostentatious gestures to impress others, but on experiences, on personal growth, on quiet, enriching luxuries that truly brought her deep, abiding happiness. She also generously donated to several carefully chosen charities, finding immense satisfaction in truly helping those in genuine need, without any expectation of reciprocation or public acknowledgement. As for Cale and Lysandra, their meticulously constructed world had indeed imploded with spectacular force. Stripped of Alara's endless financial support, they struggled profoundly, their lives a stark, brutal contrast to their former opulence. The Bentley was swiftly repossessed, a humiliating public spectacle. Their luxurious wardrobes and expensive jewelry were sold off piece by piece, not for profit, but merely to cover mounting, inescapable debts. Cale's business had collapsed entirely, leaving him unemployed and utterly unable to secure new work, his reputation in tatters, his former network vanished. Lysandra, exiled from her high society circles, found herself socially isolated, her former friends now distant and utterly uninterested in a woman who could no longer offer lavish invitations or fund their expensive excursions. They eventually found a small, modest apartment in a less desirable, often noisy part of town, a stark, painful contrast to the sprawling mansion they had once taken for granted. The children, Brandon and Chloe, had been unceremoniously pulled from their expensive private schools and enrolled in far less prestigious public institutions. The initial shock, humiliation, and bitter resentment they felt were immense, but slowly, painfully, they began to adapt. Brandon had to learn to take public transport and find a part-time job to contribute to the household. Chloe, without her expensive art academy and private tutors, had to discover her creativity in different, more accessible ways, using her ingenuity instead of endless funds. The lessons were harsh, undeniably painful, but perhaps, in the long run, profoundly necessary. They were forced, for the first time, to confront the true meaning of struggle, of self-sufficiency, and of the enduring value of genuine relationships, something money could never buy or replace. Alara occasionally heard snippets of their struggles through mutual acquaintances, but she felt no malice, no vindictiveness, only a quiet, almost detached sense of observation. Her heart, once so bruised and broken by their relentless neglect, had healed, knitting itself back together, stronger and more resilient than before. She understood now that true love and genuine respect could never be bought or demanded, they had to be earned through integrity and kindness. Her greatest regret was not the immense money she had lost, but the precious years she had tragically wasted seeking validation from those who would never, ever offer it. The moral of Alara's remarkable story is a timeless one, echoing through generations. Love, respect, and dignity are priceless currencies that no amount of material wealth can ever purchase. To cling to those who relentlessly exploit your generosity, who systematically diminish your worth, is to ultimately diminish your own spirit. Sometimes, the most profound, most courageous act of self-love is to reclaim your boundaries, your resources, and your hard-won peace, even if it means letting go of those you once mistakenly believed were your entire world. For Alara, the gentle widow who finally, defiantly pulled the deed from her pocket, true freedom was not found in her vast fortune, but in the unwavering strength of her own spirit, finally, gloriously unleashed. She had learned that the most valuable possession she owned was not the grand house, but herself. This powerful story of Alara's journey from quiet suffering to triumphant liberation is just one example of the incredible tales of justice, resilience, and profound life lessons we explore on this channel. If Alara's unwavering strength resonated with you, if her courage inspired you, and if you believe in standing up for what's right, then you're in the perfect place. We constantly bring you narratives that challenge perceptions, inspire hope, and provoke deep thought. Don't miss out on our next compelling story. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. And now, we turn to you, our incredible audience. Alara's story is a stark, powerful reminder of how deeply ingratitude and exploitation can wound the human spirit. Have you ever experienced a similar form of ingratitude or exploitation in your own life? How did you handle it? What choices did you make? Or, if you found yourself in Alara's shoes, facing such profound betrayal, what would have been your breaking point? What steps would you have taken? Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your wisdom in the comments section below. We read every single one, and your insights truly enrich our community, adding layers of perspective to these important discussions. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.